Who's got some right now?
Where?
On the front cover, looks like thumb on it.
All right, so in this unit, or this section, Will, so in this unit, we're going to get into some more details about Protist. So we'll talk about, when we talked about Protist, we mentioned certain characteristics, but actually the Protist kingdom it's not a great kingdom. In fact, scientists that study classification really would prefer it to be gone, to get rid of Protist, and to actually use 8 or 9 other separate kingdoms that is more representative of how things are related. Because the way that the Protist kingdom came about, it started off in classification. We just had plants and animals. This is 200 years ago. We had plants and animals. Eventually, fungi got separated from plants because people realized they have a lot of things different between plants and fungi. So then, anything that was not a plant, not an animal, not a fungus, just got put into this Protist category. And so you had all the bacteria there, all these other things. Eventually, people decide, okay, we're going to take bacteria out because they have no nucleus, put them in their own kingdom, Monera. But we're still left today with the Protist kingdom, which is basically a kingdom where things get put by default because they don't fit any of the other categories. When you actually look at the organisms that are in the Protist kingdom, many of them are not very close related at all. And they come from many different common ancestors. So if you look back at our taxonomy objectives a few pages, some of you noticed this, I think, is that on that page, it listed the 3 domains, but then on the left, for kingdoms that are attached to eukarya, it actually had, 12 or so different kingdoms. It has plants in there still, it has animals and fungi, but all those other kingdoms are actually, right now in the system we're talking about, lumped into Protist, when really they don't belong together. But that's the way it is because of tradition. So lots of scientists would probably prefer to use the one that's on page 146. That's a lot more accurate. But we're going to talk about Protist sort of the way they've traditionally been taught as a sort of catch-all group that has lots of different things. And because they're arranged like this, there's going to be a lot of exceptions. For example, we said that Protists are all unicellular. They're not. There are multicellular Protists as well. We're going to sort of focus on the unicellular ones, but some are multicellular. Some are autotrophs, some are heterotrophs. Okay, so that's different as well. Some reproduce sexually, some asexually. So there's a lot of variety within Protists because things just got sort of put there. But that's okay. We're going to be talking about a few examples so we can understand them a little bit better. This is a euglena. We'll be looking at euglena next week. This is an autotrophic or heterotrophic Protist. I'm going to show you this video clip. It's pretty good.
Hi, I'm Rose Robinson, and in this What Is video, we're going to discuss a group of organisms called protists. Protists are organisms that have a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles. Most are one-celled, and they are classified as plant, animal, or fungus-like, meaning they have things in common with these organisms, but they're not quite the same thing. This is because they're relatively simple and don't have tissues and organs. If you think this definition sounds a little confusing, that's for a reason. Biologists use the Protist group as sort of a garbage can. If a form of life doesn't meet the criteria for being a plant, animal, or fungus, and it has a nucleus, it's classified as a Protist. Still, there's a few characteristics that most Protists share. Because Protists have a defined nucleus, they belong to the domain eukarya, and they're called eukaryotes. Protists are probably the first eukaryotes, according to what's called endosymbiotic theory. The first protists formed when cells that did not have a nucleus engulfed smaller cells. Over many years, these smaller cells evolved into the larger cell's nucleus and other organelles. Most protists live in water, or very wet environments, and most are able to move. Some swim via whip-like projections called flagella. Some glide using hair-like extensions called cilia, and some pull themselves along using pseudopods, false feet made of cytoplasm. Some protists are free-living, and some are parasites. Some make their own food, and some get nutrition by hunting food or by simply absorbing it from their environment. Protists can reproduce via sperm and egg or by binary fission. splitting into two genetically identical cells. Protists may be simple forms of life, but they're certainly one of the most diverse.
All right, so if we think about some of the characteristics here, according to what we talked about in the last section, protists are unicellular, eukaryotic, and either heterotroph or autotroph. Hello? He's not here. He had a music lesson this period. You're welcome. All right. And so, like I said, saying that they're unicellular, that's kind of not 100% correct. There are many multicellular protists as well, but we're going to talk about them as if they're all unicellular. They live generally in the water. Okay, you know, if you take a sample of water out of a pond or a stream, you're going to find hundreds of protists living there. Single-celled, microscopic organisms. Some of them also are parasitic. They live inside of other organisms. We'll talk about next week an example of a protist that is responsible for the illness and death of millions of people throughout the world each year.
Is this an actual like dangerous thing? Is this one just like they need to know?
No, it's a real pathogen that causes disease. And protists, like I said, some can reproduce sexually by exchanging parts of their DNA with two different organisms, but most reproduce asexually through a process called binary fission. So what does binary mean?
Two.
It means two parts. Binary means two parts. Fission,
Like separation.
yeah, it's the opposite of fusion, is splitting. And so binary fission is basically when an organism splits in two, copies itself and splits in two. One parent is involved, and basically just divides. So this is a form of asexual reproduction. And if you remember when we talked about asexual reproduction back under our living things unit, what are the offspring like?
They're just in the parent.
Yeah, they're the same. They're copies of the parent. The offspring are identical. So here's a picture showing an amoeba. Basically copies its nucleus and then splits in half.
Goodbye, Mr. Duros.
See you later. Have a good day.
You too.
Oh, yeah. No problem.